Picture this. You're standing at the edge of the Florida Everglades, one of the most breathtaking natural wonders on the planet, a vast, mysterious wetland teeming with life, with alligators gliding silently through dark water and rare birds nesting in the treetops. It's peaceful, it's ancient, it's irreplaceable, and quietly, hidden in the sawgrass and murky shallows, a monster is eating it alive. Not a monster from a movie, a real one, a snake. But not just any snake. We're talking about the Burmese python, one of the largest snakes on Earth, growing up to 18 or even 20 feet long, as big as a school bus, a cold-blooded apex predator that has absolutely no business being in Florida. And yet, here we are, thousands upon thousands of them, lurking in the Everglades, hunting anything that moves, and multiplying at a rate that would make your head spin. A single female Burmese python can lay between 50 and 100 eggs at a time. Let that sink in for a second. 50 to 100 eggs. Every single year. So how did this nightmare start? Well, blame the exotic pet trade. Back in the late 1970s and 1980s, Burmese pythons became wildly popular as exotic pets in Miami. Thousands of them were imported into the United States, and South Florida became the unofficial capital of the reptile pet world. The problem? These snakes grow enormous. What starts as a manageable baby snake quickly becomes an 18-foot eating machine that no suburban home can contain. So people did the irresponsible thing. They released them. Some escaped on their own. And then, in August 1992, Hurricane Andrew came roaring through Florida and destroyed a python breeding facility near the Everglades, releasing hundreds of captive snakes directly into the wild. That was the moment everything changed. By the mid-1980s, pythons had already begun establishing a foothold in Everglades National Park. By the year 2000, multiple generations were breeding there. And with no natural predators in their new home, nothing to hunt them, nothing to fear them, they exploded in population. Scientists today estimate there are somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 Burmese pythons roaming South Florida. 100,000 to 300,000 in a place they were never supposed to be. And the damage they have done to the Everglades is almost beyond description. Here is the part that should make every single person angry. For years, when wildlife experts and conservationists sounded the alarm about Burmese pythons in the Everglades, a lot of people laughed. They shrugged. They said, it's just a snake problem. Some people thought Florida was being dramatic. Others couldn't believe that a reptile could seriously threaten an entire ecosystem. Those people were very, very wrong. Since the 1990s, species like raccoons, opossums, and bobcats have seen population declines of between 87 and 99% in areas where Burmese pythons have taken hold. 99%. That is not a typo. That is near total elimination. Marsh rabbits, foxes, white-tailed deer, wading birds, all of them decimated. Inside Everglades National Park, officials say the pythons have wiped out 95% of small mammals and have killed thousands of birds. The food web, built up over thousands of years of natural evolution, is being systematically devoured by a snake from Southeast Asia. A 2015 study by the United States Geological Survey painted a chilling picture. Researchers released 95 adult marsh rabbits in areas of the Everglades known to harbor pythons. Within just 11 months, Burmese pythons were responsible for 77% of rabbit deaths. In 11 months, the pythons didn't just hunt the rabbits. They were eliminating the prey base that native predators like Florida panthers, hawks, and alligators depend on. When the food disappears, everything that eats that food disappears too. It's a chain reaction of destruction, and the python is pulling every link. And here's the truly nightmarish part. These snakes are invisible. Their camouflage is almost perfect. They blend into the sawgrass. They submerge in the murky water. They lie motionless for days. Even trained professional hunters struggle to spot them. As Mike Kirkland, the lead invasive animal biologist for the South Florida Water Management District, put it bluntly, removing them is fairly simple. It's detection. We're having a really hard time finding them. For decades, people hunted them haphazardly, in small numbers, without any organized strategy. And the python population kept growing. something drastic had to be done. In 2017, Florida decided to get serious. The state launched two major programs specifically designed to combat the python invasion. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission created the Python Action Team, removing invasive constrictors, known as Patrick. And the South Florida Water Management District launched the Python Elimination Program, or PEP. Both programs hired contracted python hunters, paid them by the hour plus bonuses for every snake they pulled out of the swamp. The pay structure was straightforward. Hunters earned between $14 and $30 per hour depending on where they were searching, plus an extra $50 for every python measuring up to 4 feet, with an additional $25 for every foot beyond that. An active nest that earned a $200 bonus. Suddenly, python hunting was a legitimate career, and experienced outdoorsmen and women from across the country showed up ready to wade into the Everglades. Then Florida launched the Florida Python Challenge, an annual competition open to both professional and amateur hunters, dangling cash prizes to anyone who could remove the most snakes. In 2024, 857 participants from 33 states and Canada showed up. Together, they removed 195 invasive Burmese pythons. The ultimate grand prize winner that year, Ronald Kiger, caught 20 pythons and took home $10,000. But here's where people started laughing at Florida. Social media lit up. Talk show hosts made jokes. People online mocked the state for hosting what they called a snake rodeo. Critics questioned the methods. Skeptics said there was no way bounty hunters with snake tongs were going to put a dent in a population of hundreds of thousands. And honestly, looking at the early numbers, it was hard to argue. A few hundred snakes removed per year when there could be 300,000 in the wild seemed almost pointless. What the critics missed was that Florida was learning, experimenting, building a strategy. And just when the mockery was loudest, Florida pulled out something nobody expected. This is the part where the story gets genuinely wild, and the people who were laughing had to go very quiet. Florida, in its relentless effort to outsmart the Burmese python, began deploying some of the most creative and downright bizarre strategies ever seen in wildlife conservation. And the results? They stunned the scientific community, the conservation world, and frankly, anyone paying attention. First came the Judas Snake Program. Wildlife biologists began capturing pythons, surgically implanting radio transmitters inside them, and then releasing them back into the Everglades. The logic was brilliant in its simplicity. Pythons are naturally drawn to other pythons, particularly during mating season. So a released Judas snake would slither right back to where other pythons were hiding, broadcasting its location via radio signal the entire time. Researchers following the signal could then descend on a whole cluster of pythons at once, instead of searching blindly through miles of swampland. One snake leads you to many. It worked. Then, in the summer of 2025, Florida unveiled its most jaw-dropping creation yet, robot rabbits. Yes, you read that correctly. Solar-powered, remote-controlled, artificially scented robot rabbits deployed across the Everglades to lure Burmese pythons out of hiding. These weren't simple toys. The robotic rabbits were developed through a partnership between the South Florida Water Management District and researchers at the University of Florida. They were built from plush toy rabbit bodies, gutted, then wired with motors, heaters, solar panels, motion sensors, and AI-enabled cameras. Each one emitted heat, subtle movement, and artificial scent designed to mimic a real marsh rabbit, the exact kind of prey a Burmese python hunts. The decoys were placed in small enclosures monitored by cameras, and when a python approached, the system sent a real-time alert to wildlife officials who could then move in for capture. During the summer of 2025, 120 of these robo-bunnies were deployed across the Everglades. A previous experiment using live rabbits as bait had detected 26 pythons over a 3-month period, but that program was too expensive and time-consuming to sustain. The robot version was cheaper, scalable, and available 24 hours a day. And then Florida brought in an ally that nobody predicted, the private sector. A Miami-based company called Inversa Leathers began partnering with Florida's python removal programs. Inversa's business model was elegant. They manufactured luxury goods like wallets, shoes, belts, and dresses using the skins of invasive Burmese pythons, creating a financial incentive to remove the snakes that went far beyond government bounties. When Inversa partnered with Florida authorities in 2024, python removals began climbing dramatically. The numbers that came out of 2025 left everyone speechless. In July 2025 alone, 748 pythons were removed from the Everglades, compared to just 235 removed during the entire month of July in 2024. A tripling of the removal rate in a single year. Governor Ron DeSantis stood at a podium reading Python Be Gone to announce the results, stating that the partnership with Inversa had accomplished more removals in July 2025 alone than in the entire year before. By the time the 2025 Florida Python Challenge wrapped up, 934 participants from 30 states and Canada had collectively removed 294 invasive Burmese pythons, the most in the competition's history. The ultimate grand prize winner that year, Taylor Stanberry, caught an astonishing 60 pythons to claim the $10,000 prize. Since the year 2000, more than 23,000 wild Burmese pythons have been removed from the state of Florida. The people who laughed weren't laughing anymore. Let's be honest about where things stand, because this story doesn't have a clean Hollywood ending. Not yet. Even with 23,000 pythons removed, the population in the Everglades remains enormous. No one believes the snakes will ever be fully eradicated. The Everglades is a vast, inaccessible, densely vegetated wilderness, and a Burmese python in the wild is one of the most difficult animals on Earth to detect. As herpetologist Andrew Doso has noted, removing even a single female python matters enormously. It's not just that single python. It's all of her current and future reproduction. That's thousands of eggs that will never be laid. But multiply that logic by 100,000 snakes, and the scale of the challenge becomes humbling. Scientists are exploring more radical future options. Genetic engineering has been floated as a potential long-term solution, introducing genes that could suppress the python's reproductive capacity across generations. But that technology is still years, possibly decades, away from deployment. For now, the strategy is mitigation, not eradication. Reduce the population enough to allow native species to begin recovering. By the Everglades time. And on that front, Florida's arsenal keeps growing. The robot rabbits are still being tested, with plans to integrate more realistic synthetic scents. The Inversa partnership is being expanded. The Patriot program received $2 million in state funding in 2025, with Governor DeSantis calling for continued yearly investment. Access to federal and state lands for python hunters has been dramatically expanded. Florida got laughed at. Florida kept going. And now, python by python, robo-bunny by robo-bunny, the state is slowly, stubbornly clawing back one of the most precious ecosystems in the United States. The Everglades is worth fighting for. And Florida, against all the odds and all the jokes, is fighting. March 8, 2014. Burn that date into your memory, because it marks the moment the modern aviation world was forced to confront a truth it didn't think was possible. In an age of satellites, GPS, and real-time global communication, an entire commercial aircraft carrying 239 people could simply vanish from the face of the Earth. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 departed Kuala Lumpur International Airport just after midnight, bound for Beijing. It was a routine overnight flight on a Boeing 777-200ER, one of the most reliable aircraft ever built. There were 239 people on board. Families heading home, business travelers, children, a pilot with decades of experience, Captain Zari Ahmed Shah, and his first officer, Farik Abdulhamid. Nobody on that plane had any idea that night would be the last thing they ever experienced. At 1:07 a.m., the plane's ACARS data system sent its last routine transmission. Everything looked normal. At 1:19 a.m., Captain Zari made his final radio call. Good night, Malaysian 370. Those 7 words, calm, routine, professional, were the last communication anyone ever received from that aircraft. 2 minutes later, at 1:21 a.m., the plane's transponder, the device that allows civilian radar to track an aircraft, was turned off. Not because of a malfunction, not because of turbulence or electrical failure. It was deliberately switched off. That single fact, that deliberate act, is what has haunted investigators, families, and aviation experts for over a decade. Someone on that aircraft chose to disappear. But the plane didn't just vanish. Military radar tracked it making a sharp westward turn, cutting across the Malay Peninsula and heading out over the Andaman Sea. By 2:22 a.m., it was picked up one final time by military radar, approximately 200 nautical miles northwest of Penang Island. Then, silence. Except it wasn't complete silence. 4 hours after that final radar contact, the plane's satellite communication system kept pinging. Between 3:41 a.m. and 8:19 a.m., the aircraft's satellite data unit kept responding to automated signal from a communication satellite. These handshakes, ghost pings between a satellite and an aircraft, became the only breadcrumbs left to follow. The final ping, recorded at 8:19 a.m., was interpreted by analysts as likely coinciding with the plane running out of fuel. Somewhere in the vast, dark southern Indian Ocean, flight MH370 fell. But no one saw it happen, and no one could find it. What followed was a search operation unlike anything the aviation world had ever seen. And what made it even more agonizing was how badly it started. The Kuala Lumpur Aeronautical Rescue Coordination Center didn't even activate until around 5:30 in the morning, more than 4 hours after the last contact with the plane. By then, MH370 had already completed its mysterious westward turn and was deep into the Andaman Sea. The initial search focused on the South China Sea, where the plane was supposed to be flying. It wasn't there. Days were lost searching the wrong ocean. As the military radar data was analyzed and the satellite ping analysis was refined, the search shifted dramatically, first to the Strait of Malacca, then to the Andaman Sea, and ultimately, after Malaysia's Prime Minister stood before the world on March 24, 2014, to make a gut-wrenching announcement, to the southern Indian Ocean. The satellite data pointed to one of two corridors, northwest towards Central Asia, or southwest into the remote southern Indian Ocean. The evidence increasingly pointed south, to one of the most desolate, storm-lashed, inaccessible stretches of ocean on the planet. At the peak of the search, 29 aircraft, 6 helicopters, and 18 ships from 26 countries were deployed. 20 satellites, including 20 from China alone, were tasked to the mission. At one point, search teams were combing an area of nearly 7.7 million square kilometers. The numbers are almost incomprehensible. And still, the plane could not be found. The official underwater search, conducted between 2014 and 2017, mapped 279,000 square kilometers of previously uncharted ocean floor using state-of-the-art echo sounding technology. It cost approximately $155 million. Malaysia paid 58% of that bill, Australia 32%, and China 10%. In January 2017, the search was officially suspended. The priority zone of 120,000 square kilometers had been exhausted. Nothing. Then, in July 2015, a single glimmer of hope, a piece of the plane's wing, called a flaperon, washed up on Réunion Island in the Indian Ocean. It was confirmed as debris from MH370. Over the following months and years, more than 20 other pieces of possible wreckage were found on beaches and islands along the African coastline. The ocean currents matched the theory. The plane had gone down in the southern Indian Ocean. But where, exactly, remained the $160 million question. In 2018, a private marine technology company called Ocean Infinity stepped in. Using a fleet of 8 autonomous underwater vehicles, deep-sea drones capable of operating without a human operator, Ocean Infinity searched an additional 112,000 square kilometers of ocean floor. Once again, nothing. But the technology used in those searches was unlike anything deployed before. The maps and data collected revolutionized scientific understanding of the Indian Ocean floor and were later used for climate research and future deep-sea operations. The search had become, at that point, the most expensive aviation investigation in history, with costs estimated at between $135 million and $160 million. And the plane was still missing.